Around 400,000 years ago, during the middle of the Pleistocene epoch, Northern Europe entered one of the most unforgiving climatic cycles in human history. Vast ice sheets advanced and retreated like slow, merciless tides. Winters were not seasonal inconveniences, but long, crushing sieges that lasted for months, sometimes years, with temperatures plunging far below freezing and landscapes stripped bare of edible plants. This was not a single winter or even a generation of winters. It was a repeating nightmare endured over hundreds of thousands of years, and in this hostile world Neanderthals survived. Long before reliable, habitual fire use became widespread and dependable, Neanderthals occupied territories stretching from modern-day Spain to the windswept plains of Eastern Europe and the icy fringes of Siberia. These were not mild refuges. Snow-blanketed valleys, icy winds scoured open ground, and prey animals migrated or perished under the relentless cold. For modern humans, survival in such conditions without constant fire would seem impossible. Yet archaeological evidence shows that Neanderthals endured, adapted, and thrived through these brutal winters using strategies that reshaped the course of human evolution. To understand how they did it, we must first understand the world they lived in. Between roughly 400,000 and 40,000 years ago, Europe was locked in a pattern of glacial and interglacial cycles. Even during warmer intervals, winters remained severe. Forests were sparse, dominated by cold-resistant pine and birch. Open-stepped tundra stretched across vast regions, offering little shelter from the wind. Predators such as cave lions, wolves, and hyenas competed fiercely for the same prey Neanderthals depended on. This was a land where exposure alone could kill within hours. Contrary to outdated portrayals, Neanderthals were not primitive brutes barely clinging to existence. They were highly specialized humans, biologically and culturally adapted to extreme cold. Their bodies told the first part of the story. Neanderthals were short, stocky, and powerfully built, with broad chests and thick limbs. This body shape minimized surface area relative to volume, reducing heat loss in freezing environments. Their nasal passages were large and complex, likely warming icy air before it reached the lungs. Even their muscle mass played a role, generating more body heat during movement. But biology alone was not enough. Survival through 400,000 winters required knowledge passed down across countless generations. Archaeological sites reveal repeated seasonal occupation of caves and rock shelters, often positioned to block prevailing winds and maximize exposure to winter sunlight. These were not random choices. Neanderthals understood their landscapes intimately. They returned to the same shelters year after year, suggesting long-term planning and memory rooted in survival experience. Some of the most revealing evidence comes from sites like Shanidar Cave, where layers of occupation show Neanderthals repeatedly sheltering during cold periods. Animal bones found inside such caves indicate winter hunting, with prey processed and consumed during the harshest months. These were not desperate last stands. They were organized survival strategies. One of the greatest challenges was staying warm at night. Without reliable fire, Neanderthals relied on insulation rather than heat generation. Animal hides were essential. Thick skins from bison, reindeer, and woolly rhinoceros were scraped, cleaned, and shaped into coverings. While direct evidence of tailored clothing is scarce due to decay over time, stone tools associated with hide working are abundant. Scrapers worn smooth by repeated use suggest systematic processing of skins, likely for clothing and bedding. Sleeping arrangements mattered as much as clothing. Neanderthals did not lie directly on frozen ground. Layers of vegetation, moss, leaves, and animal fur created insulated sleeping platforms. These materials trapped body heat and reduced contact with cold stone surfaces. Even today, similar techniques are used by Arctic survivalists. The principle is simple but effective. Insulation preserves warmth better than exposure to cold air. Diet was another critical factor. Neanderthals were highly skilled hunters, focusing on large, calorie-rich animals. During winter, fat became more important than lean meat. Fat provides significantly more energy and helps maintain body temperature. Evidence from butchered bones shows selective processing of marrow-rich limbs and fat deposits. Neanderthals cracked bones to extract every possible calorie, a practice that intensified during colder periods. This diet supported not just survival, but physical resilience. High-protein, high-fat nutrition helped maintain muscle mass and immune function in environments where illness and injury could be fatal. Teeth where patterns indicate heavy chewing, consistent with tough, fibrous foods and dried meat consumed during winter scarcity. Social cooperation may have been the most important survival tool of all. Neanderthals lived in small, tightly bonded groups. Survival in winter required shared labor, shared food, and shared knowledge. Injured individuals often lived for years after sustaining debilitating wounds, as shown by healed fractures and long-term disabilities in skeletal remains. This means others cared for them, fed them, and protected them. In a world where one broken leg could mean death, cooperation was not kindness, it was necessity. The question of fire remains complex. Neanderthals clearly used fire at times, but evidence suggests it was not always reliable or constantly available, especially during earlier periods. Some sites show long gaps with no clear fire residues despite cold conditions. This implies that Neanderthals could survive extended periods without dependable fire, relying instead on insulation, shelter, diet, and group cohesion. Fire was a tool, not a crutch. What makes this story matter in world history is not just endurance, but adaptation. Neanderthals were among the first humans to master survival in extreme cold without modern technology. Their strategies laid the groundwork for later human expansion into harsh environments. They proved that intelligence is not defined by invention alone, but by the ability to adapt behavior, body, and culture to unforgiving realities. By the time modern humans entered Europe around 45,000 years ago, Neanderthals had already survived hundreds of thousands of brutal winters. They were not relics waiting to be replaced. They were seasoned survivors of Ice Age Europe, shaped by cold, scarcity, and resilience. Their story is not one of failure, but of extraordinary endurance in a world that tested the limits of what it meant to be human. If survival through endless winters depended only on enduring cold, Neanderthals would have vanished early in the Ice Age. What allowed them to persist for nearly 400 years was not toughness alone, but a sophisticated system of seasonal planning, mobility, hunting intelligence, and technological restraint perfectly matched to their environment. They did not fight the Ice Age, they learned how to live inside it. One of the most misunderstood aspects of Neanderthal life is their movement across the landscape. For decades, they were described as static cave dwellers, clinging to shelters until starvation or cold forced them out. Archaeology now shows the opposite. Neanderthals were highly mobile, shifting their locations with the seasons in patterns that maximized survival. Winter settlements were carefully chosen, while warmer months allowed wider-ranging movements across open plains and river valleys. During winter, Neanderthals gravitated toward rock shelters, limestone caves, and south, facing overhangs that reduced wind exposure and trapped solar warmth. These locations were not random. Many were positioned near natural choke points used by migrating animals. This allowed hunting with minimal energy expenditure at a time when calories mattered most. Excavations show repeated winter occupation of the same sites over thousands of years, indicating long-term memory and inherited geographic knowledge passed down across generations. Outside winter months, Neanderthals expanded outward. Open-air sites reveal tool-making zones, hunting camps, and butchery areas spread across wide territories. This seasonal mobility prevented overexploitation of resources and allowed animal populations to recover. It also reduced the risk of disease and waste buildup, critical in cold environments where decomposition is slow but pathogens can linger. Hunting was the core of Neanderthal winter survival. Unlike modern humans who later relied heavily on projectile weapons, Neanderthals specialized in close range hunting using thrusting spears. This was dangerous, physically demanding, and required coordination. Skeletal injuries found on Neanderthal remains closely resemble those of modern rodeo riders, indicating repeated trauma from close encounters with large animals, but danger brought reward. Close range hunting allowed Neanderthals to target the largest Ice Age animals, including mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, bison, and giant deer. These animals provided enormous returns in meat, fat, hides, sinew, and bone. A single successful hunt could support a group for weeks during winter. Evidence from kill sites shows systematic butchery, with cuts placed precisely to maximize efficiency and minimize waste. Their stone tool technology reflects this efficiency. The Mousterian tool tradition, associated with Neanderthals for hundreds of thousands of years, emphasized reliability over innovation. Tools were designed to be resharpened repeatedly, extending their lifespan. This mattered during winter, when raw materials might be inaccessible under snow and ice. A tool that could be maintained was more valuable than one that required frequent replacement. Neanderthals also understood the landscape well enough to stockpile resources. Some sites show evidence of carcasses processed and transported to shelters, rather than consumed entirely at kill locations. This suggests planning beyond immediate needs. In winter, when hunting conditions were unpredictable, stored meat could mean the difference between survival and starvation. Cold demanded energy efficiency in every action. Neanderthals did not chase prey across long distances unless necessary. Instead, they favored ambush hunting, driving animals toward natural barriers such as cliffs, riverbanks, or narrow valleys. These tactics reduced risk and energy expenditure while increasing success rates. Cooperation was essential. No individual could bring down Ice Age megafauna alone. Group size mattered. Neanderthal groups were small enough to remain mobile, but large enough to hunt effectively. Social bonds were reinforced through shared labor and shared risk. Hunting injuries, sometimes severe, did not automatically mean death. Individuals with healed fractures and disabilities survived long after their injuries, indicating care from others. During winter, such care required extra effort and sacrifice, reinforcing the idea that Neanderthal survival was a collective achievement. Beyond hunting, Neanderthals exploited every usable resource their environment offered. Bones were shaped into tools, sinew became binding material, fat was rendered and consumed. Even teeth and antler fragments show signs of secondary use. Nothing valuable was discarded lightly, especially in winter conditions where replacement was uncertain. Cold also influenced Neanderthal daily rhythms. Winter days were short and darkness arrived early. Activity was concentrated during daylight hours, with nights devoted to rest and minimal movement. This conserved energy and reduced exposure to freezing temperatures. Shelters show signs of spatial organization, with specific areas for tool production, food processing, and sleeping. Such organization reduced chaos and injury in confined winter spaces. The absence of constant fire made these systems even more impressive. Without dependable heat, Neanderthals relied on reducing heat loss rather than generating warmth. Movement was purposeful, not wasteful. Shelter entrances were likely blocked with hides or vegetation to trap warmth. Group sleeping arrangements further conserved heat, with bodies positioned close together beneath layers of insulation. Neanderthals were also keen observers of animal behavior. Seasonal patterns of prey migration were well understood. They knew when herds would pass through certain valleys, when animals were weakest, and where predators competed for the same kills. This knowledge reduced uncertainty, which is the true enemy of winter survival. Some archaeological sites show evidence of Neanderthals returning to hunting grounds generations apart, suggesting oral traditions or shared memory systems. While we cannot hear their language, the coordination required for hunting and seasonal planning implies complex communication. Knowledge of where to go, when to move, and how to hunt had to be transmitted accurately across time. This long-term adaptation mattered far beyond Neanderthal survival alone. By proving that humans could occupy cold, high-latitude environments without agriculture, permanent settlements, or advanced technology, Neanderthals expanded the boundaries of what it meant to be human. They transformed Europe from a seasonal hunting ground into a year-round homeland. When later human populations entered these regions, they encountered landscapes already mapped by Neanderthal experience. Trails, hunting grounds, and shelter locations were not discovered anew. They were inherited. In this way, Neanderthals shaped the human story even after their disappearance. Winter after winter, generation after generation, Neanderthals refined a way of life that balanced risk, cooperation, and restraint. Their success was not loud or flashy. It was quiet, persistent, and extraordinarily effective. In a world where the cold punished every mistake, they survived not by overpowering nature, but by understanding it deeply. To truly grasp how extraordinary Neanderthal survival was, one must confront the most counterintuitive reality revealed by archaeology. For long stretches of their history, Neanderthals endured brutal winters without consistent, reliable fire. This does not mean fire was unknown to them. Evidence shows they understood it and used it when conditions allowed. But fire was not always available, not always controllable, and not always present at every winter occupation site. Survival, therefore, depended on systems that functioned even in its absence. This reality forces a radical shift in how we think about Ice Age life. Modern humans instinctively see fire as the foundation of warmth, safety, and survival. For Neanderthals, fire was a powerful advantage, but not a guaranteed one. Their world demanded resilience even when flames went out. The first line of defense against the cold was clothing. While organic materials rarely survive in the archaeological record, indirect evidence is overwhelming. Neanderthal toolkits are dominated by scrapers designed specifically for hide processing. The wear patterns on these tools show repeated, intensive use consistent with softening, thick animal skins. These were not decorative garments. They were functional insulation systems designed to block wind, retain heat, and remain flexible in freezing conditions. Neanderthal clothing was likely layered. Thick outer hides provided wind resistance, while softer inner layers trapped warm air close to the body. Fur was probably worn inward for insulation, a technique still used by Arctic cultures today. Even without needles, hides could be wrapped, tied, and secured using sinew, leather strips, or bone fasteners. Precision tailoring was not necessary. Effective insulation was. Shelter design was equally critical. Caves were preferred not because Neanderthals feared the open world, but because stone provided thermal stability. Temperatures inside caves fluctuate far less than outside, remaining relatively warmer during winter nights and cooler during summer heat. This natural buffering effect reduced the risk of hypothermia even without fire. At many sites, evidence suggests that cave entrances were partially sealed during winter using hides, branches, or vegetation. This reduced airflow and trapped body heat inside. Sleeping areas were placed away from entrances and elevated off the stone floor using bedding made of plant matter and animal fur. These details mattered. Heat loss through the ground can be lethal, even when air temperatures are survivable. Group sleeping further amplified warmth. Neanderthals slept close together, sharing body heat beneath layers of insulation. This was not merely social bonding. It was thermoregulation. In extreme cold, shared warmth can mean survival. Such arrangements required trust and strong social cohesion, traits clearly present in Neanderthal groups. Diet played a hidden but essential role in surviving without fire. Raw meat consumption, while less efficient than cooked food, still provided calories, fat, and protein. Neanderthals compensated for the lack of cooking by selecting nutrient-dense prey and consuming marrow, organ meat, and fat-rich tissues. Marrow extraction marks are especially common in winter layers, suggesting intensified fat consumption when energy demands were highest. Fat was crucial. It burns slowly in the human body, providing sustained energy and helping maintain core temperature. In cold environments, people consuming low-fat diets suffer rapid energy loss and hypothermia. Neanderthals avoided this fate through deliberate prey selection and complete carcass processing. Metabolism also played a role. Neanderthals had higher basal metabolic rates than modern humans, meaning they produced more internal heat at rest. This was not accidental. It was an evolutionary response to long-term cold exposure. Combined with their muscular builds, this internal heat production reduced dependence on external heat sources. Daily activity patterns were shaped by the absence of fire. Movement was minimized during the coldest periods. Tasks were clustered to reduce unnecessary exposure. Tools were maintained carefully to avoid long forays into freezing conditions for raw materials. Every action reflected an understanding that energy lost to cold could not easily be regained. Social structure reinforced these adaptations. Knowledge of shelter locations, hide preparation, seasonal movements, and survival strategies had to be transmitted accurately across generations. This implies teaching, communication, and shared cultural memory. Neanderthal survival was not instinct alone. It was learned behavior refined over hundreds of thousands of years. Care for the vulnerable further demonstrates this system. Individuals missing teeth, suffering from severe arthritis, or bearing healed traumatic injuries survived for years. In winter conditions without fire, caring for such individuals required extra insulation, food sharing, and protection. This investment suggests that Neanderthals valued group stability over short-term efficiency. Losing experienced members would have meant losing critical survival knowledge. One of the most compelling examples of this social resilience comes from La Chapelle, Orc, Saints, where an elderly Neanderthal male with extensive physical degeneration was intentionally buried. He had survived long past the point where he could hunt or defend himself. His continued survival through multiple winters without reliable fire speaks volumes about communal care. Neanderthals also adapted psychologically. Fear wastes energy. Panic leads to fatal mistakes. Their long-term success suggests emotional control and familiarity with danger. Winter was not an emergency. It was a known condition with known responses. This mindset reduced stress and improved decision-making under pressure. Fire, when available, enhanced these systems but did not replace them. It provided light, allowed cooking, and offered additional warmth. But Neanderthal survival did not collapse when fire was absent. That distinction is critical. It shows that they had already mastered the fundamentals of cold survival before fire became a dependable companion. This challenges the idea that technological progress alone defines human success. Neanderthals demonstrate that biological adaptation, social cooperation, and behavioral intelligence can rival or even surpass technological solutions in extreme environments. By surviving without reliable fire, Neanderthals pushed the boundaries of human possibility. They proved that warmth could come from bodies, hides, shelter, and shared effort. In doing so, they carved out a place for humanity in regions previously considered uninhabitable. By the time Neanderthals disappeared from Europe around 40,000 years ago, they had already accomplished something no other human lineage had managed before them. They had transformed Ice Age Europe from a marginal frontier into a long-term homeland. For nearly 400 years, they endured winters that reshaped landscapes, erased forests, and killed unprepared life within days. Their disappearance was not the failure of an inferior species, but the closing chapter of one of the most successful cold, adapted human experiments in history. Understanding why Neanderthals vanished requires separating survival ability from long-term resilience in a changing world. Neanderthals were masters of cold environments, but the world they dominated did not remain static. Around 45,000 years ago, Europe entered a period of increasing climatic instability. Winters grew more unpredictable, ice sheets advanced and retreated rapidly, ecosystems fractured, and familiar prey patterns became unreliable. At the same time, a new human population arrived. Modern humans entering Europe did not step into an empty land. They encountered territories shaped by generations of Neanderthal knowledge. Hunting grounds, shelter locations, migration corridors, and seasonal rhythms were already mapped by experience. In many ways, modern humans inherited a landscape made survivable by Neanderthals. The difference was not intelligence or bravery. It was flexibility. Modern humans relied more heavily on long-distance social networks, symbolic communication, and rapid cultural innovation. Where Neanderthals refined stable systems that worked exceptionally well in consistent cold, modern humans adapted faster to sudden change. This mattered when environments shifted faster than tradition could keep up. But Neanderthals did not simply vanish overnight. Genetic evidence shows interbreeding between Neanderthals and modern humans across Eurasia. Today, billions of people outside Africa carry Neanderthal DNA. Traits linked to immune response, cold adaptation, skin physiology, and even pain sensitivity have Neanderthal origins. Their survival strategies did not disappear. They became part of us. Sites such as Vindiger Cave provide genetic material confirming that Neanderthals contributed directly to the modern human gene pool. This means their Ice Age adaptations helped later humans survive in harsh climates long after Neanderthals themselves were gone. Their disappearance was likely the result of multiple pressures acting together. Small population sizes made Neanderthals vulnerable to demographic collapse. Climatic instability disrupted prey availability. Competition for resources intensified as modern humans expanded. None of these factors alone explains extinction. Together, they created a situation where even the most resilient cold specialists could not recover. Yet, measuring Neanderthals by their extinction misses the point. Many species vanish after dominating their environments for millions of years. What matters is impact. Neanderthals expanded the limits of human habitation. They demonstrated that humans could live year-round in freezing climates without agriculture, permanent structures, or advanced technology. This achievement reshaped the trajectory of human evolution. Their survival strategies influenced later developments in clothing, shelter design, hunting cooperation, and social care. The idea that vulnerable group members should be protected through winter did not originate with modern humans. It was already practiced deep in prehistory. This ethic of cooperation became a cornerstone of later human societies. Neanderthals also challenge modern assumptions about progress. Fire, agriculture, and complex tools are often treated as the defining features of human success. Neanderthals show that survival can be built on restraint, efficiency, and deep environmental understanding. They did not dominate nature through excess. They endured it through balance. Their story matters today because it reframes what intelligence looks like under pressure. In a world facing rapid environmental change, Neanderthals remind us that adaptation is not always about inventing something new. Sometimes it is about mastering fundamentals so well that survival continues even when advantages disappear. When the last Neanderthals died, Europe did not become safer or warmer. Winters continued. Ice continued to advance. But humanity endured, carrying fragments of Neanderthal biology, behavior, and resilience forward into the future. They were not evolutionary dead ends, they were pathfinders, their endurance through 400 brutal winters without reliable fire stands as one of the most extraordinary achievements in human history. It proves that long before cities, long before farming, and long before civilization, humans had already learned how to survive the coldest world Earth could offer.